Try and get some sense of your history as a filmmaker, your influences. And you talked about it a bit this morning, but before we get to the bit where you make your first film, The Clockmaker, The Watchmaker of St. Paul, I just want to sort of recap. It was something you talked about really well in your film, The Journey Through French Cinema, but how you became obsessed by movies, because it seemed to happen to you from a very, very early age. You know, very early on, it became your major passion in life. And perhaps you could just explain how that came to be.
I think it happened when I was 13. I was already going a lot to the movies, but I remember seeing within 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, 2 westerns of John Ford. She Wore a Yellow Ribbon and For Apache. And I remember coming back, and I was sometimes taking the resume of films in some magazines that they were publishing the screenplay with photo, and immediately I remember putting the name of John Ford, directed by John Ford, and I think I thought that I wanted to do the same. I wanted to film the sky. I wanted to film the cavalry at that time. I wanted I decided I would be a film director.
And at this point, you were in Lyon? Where were you?
No, I was in Paris. I stayed in Lyon. I was born in Lyon. We stayed in Lyon until I was 6 or 7. Then my parents moved. I came back very often to Lyon. But we are living in Paris. And I was seeing those films in Paris. And so I decided, and I've never changed my mind. And films were my passions. But I had a lot of interest. I was reading a lot of books. I was interested in music.
Well, that comes out in your cinema, and we'll talk about that as well.
I was going very often to the concert. I remember, all kinds of music. Classical, opera. I remember being very bored the first time I went to see an opera. Very, very bored, but loving later on, 6 or 7 years later, loving Tales of Hoffmann. Remember? Seeing, I think it was within maybe the same fortnight, I saw Tales of Hoffmann and Miles Davis live. The Miles Davis
wow, that's
quintet
a contrast.
with Barney. When he went to France to record the music of
the Louis Malle.
The film of Louis Malle. And so I was going to. I was interested by a lot of things. I was not one of those people who will only see films. And there are other things which did not interest me a lot. I was not interested by cars. By that.
But your parents were not keen on your obsession with cinema.
No. My father was who liked going to the cinema. He took me very often to see films with him, but he was mostly. He had been a poet. He had created a magazine during the war, which was one of the few. There was 3 or 4 magazines which were not pro-Vichy, right. Called Confluence, and they publish a lot of well-known writers and poets, from Giraudoux to Aragon. In fact, my parents, my father and my mother, protected and hid in their home Louis Aragon, who was a very well-known communist poet, researched by the German, and he stayed, I think, 10 months in our house. And he wrote one of his most famous poems called Il n'y a pas d'amour heureux for my mother. It's dedicated to my mother. And I have the original. home.
That's remarkable.
And my father, this magazine had some problem with the censorship several times with Vichy.
Yes.
With my father, it is in this magazine that for the first time you could read, I think, 3 or 4 chapters of For Whom the Bell Tolls.
The Hemingway.
The Hemingway novel that my father had translated. And it's not, let's say, it's not a pro-fascist book. Even in the Hollywood adaptation, the word fascist is never pronounced. Yeah. And when they ask the screenwriter Dudley Nichols who suppressed the word fascist from the dialogue, because it's difficult to make a whole film about the Spanish Civil War without having the
word fascist in it. No.
He very simply answered the fascist. Which is the best answer.
So that was your family background, but they wanted you to be a lawyer, or
no? They wanted me to go to study political science, to be a lawyer or something in politics, and I didn't want, so I resisted. And I did some resistance
of your own, and then
I won.
And you became a film critic, and then you became, and this obviously is a source of many of your stories and anecdotes and your passion for a whole range of filmmakers is when essentially you became a publicist with your great friend
Pierre Rission, who just died, who was responsible for discovering about 40 directors several years before everybody. I mean, going from being the first to fight for Joseph Losey, but also to discovering, the first one to discover the talent of John Borman. He released his first film with the Dave Clark 5 already. To Jared Schatzberg, but also to Lino Broca in the Philippines, King Hu, Wu Tsao Tsien, I mean, hundreds of directors, which James Lester Perry, and rehabilitating a lot of American directors. We were re-releasing their films from Raoul Walsh to John Ford, a lot of films of Raoul Walsh, Samuel Fuller.
Who came to live in Paris, didn't he? Who came to live in Paris.
Yeah, after the tremendous success of Shock Corridor. That was the company of Pierre who released Shock Corridor, and it was a huge hit in Paris, and a huge critical hit. And we work with practically all the people who had been blacklisted, from Losey, John Barry, Abe Polonsky, Albert Moles, Dalton Trumbo. So I knew them all. I work with them all.
So you're immersed in this extraordinary position where you, and I think you've said on several occasions, you only actually worked on films with filmmakers whose work you admired and liked.
Yes.
That was your kind of philosophy.
That was our philosophy. We are not publicists taking a film for money. We wanted to love the film, and we defended some film, but we were very, very badly paid sometimes. We accepted because the people had not a lot of money to make it for very, very, very little money. But all kind of directors, all kind of country, and a lot of French directors who fought for a lot. I mean, it's how I spent 4 weeks with Jean Renoir when the re-release of La Bête Humaine, and people like that, and it was very exciting to organize.
But when you were doing this, and obviously we're talking really about the kind of the 1960s and the early 70s. Were you also, you said, you always, in a sense, you did this and you were a film critic because you know, you were waiting. You were waiting to make movies yourself. But were you, whilst you were doing this, you were trying to make movies. You were trying to make.
I was writing screenplays which were rejected.
Yeah.
It took me a long time. I mean, I wrote a screenplay based on a book by Robert Louis Stevenson, The Beach of Falisa, and I wrote the screenplay, and I had the agreement of Jacques Brel and James Mason. James Mason said that it's a book that he knew well, and that was the best adaptation he ever read of the book. But I could not make the film. I never found the money. I was betrayed by a producer linked to the New Wave, Pierre Bromberger, who betrayed me completely. He was trying to sell my screenplay to other people and get me off the film.
Right. Okay.
And I wrote an adaptation of a book by Alexandre Dumas, who later on became the basis for the original screenplay of Let the Joy Reign Supreme.
Right. Okay.
So I was trying to make films, but I could not. Until The Clockmaker.
But in between that, technically, were you were doing shorts though as well and things like that?
I had done 2 shorts which were very bad. I was not happy with them. I find they were childish, they were immature, they were a kind of imitation of American cinema. I had received rather good reviews, but I decided to stop and to make a feature, my first feature, only when I was ready to deal, to be a grown-up and not do that, not do an adolescent kind of film. And the fact of having 2 children helped me to grow. And so when I felt I was ready, I did a draft. I had tremendous admiration for Georges Simenon. And I took a book of Simenon, which the action was taking place in the States, and I decided to transpose it in my native city, which I knew that would help me too. Yes. And I wrote a 30 pages draft, which contains most of the scenes of the film. And I went to Philippe Noiret.
And did you know him? Did you know him?
I had met him because I had worked on the release of a film which I liked, of Peter Yates, called Murphy's War.
Yes. Yeah.
With Noiret and Peter O'Toole.
Yes.
And Noiret had a tremendous admiration for Peter O'Toole. I mean, Noiret loved a lot of many British actors. I remember when I made a film called, in France, Daddy Nostalgie,
with Doug Bogart, yeah.
With Doug Bogart. When he learned that I was going to work with Doug Bogart, he called me, and he says, "You will be delighted with him. You will be delighted." I mean, he's wonderful. So I had met Noiret, but briefly. So I called him. I called the agent. He gave the screenplay. He called. He fixed me an appointment. He says, we should have lunch. And I will never forget that lunch. And during the lunch, he says, I'm doing the film. My agent advised me not to do it, but I will do it. I will do it. And so because he accepted, I could find somebody who decided to finance the screenplay, with the complete screenplay, with which I decided to hire Orange and Bost.
Yes.
Not, contrary to what has been written sometimes, not because they had been attacked by Truffaut or excluded by the New Wave. You never hire people for such a reason. I mean, I'm not going to. I mean, making a film is taking 16. In the case of Clockmaker, it took 3 years of my life between the time of the writing. So you don't hire collaborators, very important, just to fight a war against a critic. I mean, to fight that war, you write an article. You don't spend 3 years of your life. I wanted to work with them because I saw a lot of the film they had written. I thought the attack were completely unjustified, that when there was a thing which was not, was debatable, in 80% of the case, it was because of the director, not because of the writing. The writing was great. It's because it was filmed in a close-up when it should have been kept in a wide shot. Things like that.
But just to pause you there for that, because I think it's important to recognise for people who aren't as familiar necessarily with French cinema, is that these two screenwriters are, their career is extraordinary in terms of the history of French cinema, and you were going to people who Truffaut had attacked, but had written some of the greatest films in French cinema.
And contrary to a lot of people who are going on, taking the attack of Truffaut and going on writing and that, I saw the film. And I judge, when you see, I saw some of the film Orange wrote alone in the 40s. I saw the first film he wrote with Bost called Douce by Claude de Tonlara, which is a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece. And it has a scene in Douce. I mean, it's done in 1942 film, and it was released at the beginning of 43, where you have a countess, wonderfully played by, what's her name? Marguerite Moreno, who goes with a governess to visit a family of poor people who live very high, I mean, under the roof. And there is a great line by Orange who says, when she says to the governess, "Have you noticed that the poor always live very high?" in the book. And they are supposed to help them, to bring them food, a kind of boiled beef and a soup, and that, and very patronizing. It's a very biting scene, very, very biting, nearly Buñuelian kind of scene. And at the end of the scene, she goes out and she says to the poor woman, poor and old woman, "I wish you patience and resignation," which were some of the words that Maréchal Pétain was using in most of his speech at the time. Right. I mean, I'm asking to the French people to be patient, and then the guy, guy from the working class guy, who comes after that, you say you should have wish, impatience, and revolt. I remember when I saw the film, I thought to myself, I want to work, one day I will work with the people who wrote Impatience and Revolt when my country was occupied, when there was one of the worst regimes we ever had. You had two screenwriters who wrote that line, and I wanted to meet them. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not to fight the new wave, because, and I saw many other films that they did, En cas de malheur, a very good adaptation of Simon, very, 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 very good. And the film were biting, had a great, the women parts were terrific, contrary to a lot of French films which were sometimes misogynistic. And so I decided I wanted to work with them. It's how I picked them up. And the last reason, which was a rather smart. I'd worked, I said, on with many blacklisted directors, and I saw how enthusiastic they were when they had the opportunity of coming back.
Yeah.
I had met Ringlarner when he worked on MASH. I'd met Dalton Trumbo when he worked on Exodus and Spartacus. And they were so happy. Yeah. They were giving everything. Waldo Salt, when he did Midnight Cowboy. I mean, Albert Moles, when he started to work with Clint Eastwood on The Big Eyed. I saw the enthusiasm, and I said, they are, for the moment, they are expelled from the fact that a young film, somebody who is young is coming, I will have them with me. And I'd seen a lot of French directors working with well-known screenwriters, fashionable, and those screenwriters were doing so many screenplays that the directors had a problem getting them to rewrite a scene because they were doing, at that time they had signed 2 or 3 other contracts. And I thought, I'm young, I haven't done nothing, so I will never have that. When Orange et Bost, they will be ready to fight with me without counting the time, the number of drafts, and what they did. So that's how I work with them.
And in terms of what you learnt from making your first film, I mean, a number of directors talk, about how, in a way, that sort of freedom about you've got to deliver. There's a pressure, but on the other hand, you never have quite that freedom that you have on a first film.
No, it's not true.
You don't think that's true?
No, it's not true. Because when you do a first film, you are too frightened by things. For me, all the films were like, except that the more you are doing film, greater is the impression that you don't know anything. But maybe also because I can borrow a line of somebody which I admire tremendously, which was Michael Powell. He said that all the film he made them because he wanted to learn something. I could absolutely borrow that line. All the film I made, the main reason is I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn about a period. My second film was the 18th century, a moment never studied by French history. The Regency, the 15 years between 18 years between Louis XIV and Louis XV. On a special criminal case in the judge and the assassin, and which had very barely been studied, and I think it was very, very, very timely when it was.
Well, the thing about that, and we actually have the trailer of Judge and the Assassin because we're going to talk about noir obviously as well, and is that this must have been one of the first films. I don't know in front, but this is about a serial killer.
Yeah, this was, I think, one of the first films about a serial killer, and a serial killer in the countryside, not in cities. I mean, he killed little shepherd and shepherdess. I mean, kids who were 12, 15. He was sometimes raping them, boys and girls. But in the country, it was always happening in a rural environment, not in the city. And but he was supposedly to have killed about 15 or 16 persons. And he was judged on only one murder, because they wanted to incorporate the other murders, because that would that would increase the possibility of being considered as a madman.
Right.
So they decided to concentrate only on one murder and get the death penalty, which they got. So, yeah, but again, in all my films, I mean, I remember when I did The Princess of Montpensier, it was about the war, the religion war between Protestant and Catholic, and which was so bloody, so horrible, so cruel. And doing The Electric Mist, I learned a lot of things about part of America I knew nothing about, which was southwest Louisiana, southern Louisiana. I mean, all the films, when I did the film about the cops, I mean, fighting against the dealers, the drug dealers, but not greatly organized. The guy who was selling drugs in the subways or near the school. This is a world that I did not know at all. I mean, I had no knowledge, not at all, not the first idea of the historical context of Life and Nothing But. And it's what I was discovering, which was, I was enthusiastic about it, and I wanted to communicate what I was discovering to the audience. That was the motivation for all the films.
And I can see that in terms of your passion and interest in contemporary culture, in terms of politics and society and history. But I want to go back to we were making a joke earlier on today about Howard Hawks and about the, one set of critics over kind of analysing and trying to project certain kind of theories onto his work his practical work. And I want to come back to you about the practicalities of becoming a filmmaker. And you've decided you've made your first film, or you're making your first film with a group of actors. You've made some shorts and you've written, but there's a whole kind of physicality and technicality about making movies as a director, about how you're working with the actors, how you're working with the crew, where you're placing the camera. How did you learn that?
I learned it by seeing films, looking at it, but I learned it also when I was a press agent on, for instance, on the first film I worked, I was with Godard, with Chabrol, with Agnès Varda. I was going in the editing room. I was on the set sometimes, and then I was seeing how they were editing the film. I learned that. Right. I did my first work. I did the trailer for Platoon 317. I wrote the text, and I worked with my editor to find a shot to cut it. So I was learning being a press agent, I was learning how to release a film, the relationship with the cinema, right. the problem of the projection, how to advertise. I mean, I learned a lot of things, practical. Then you cannot learn direction. You must have it or you don't have it. You can learn a few rules. Be polite, but you must have an instinct. You must. I talked to some directors. Sometime I was getting something, knowing that it could help me. I could use it. I mean, a director said when I did not know what to do, I was asking for a very elaborate shot. Very complicated, so that was giving me 1 hour and a half, and during that I was thinking, and I was getting, Jacques Tourneur. Jacques Tourneur gave me some ideas which I used after that in a lot of films. I mean, always have the source of light, which is lighting the room, to have it in the shot, whether it's a window or a lamp, always have it, always making understand to the audience where is the light. and he was obsessed by sound. And he was, when he was doing the last rehearsal, he was taking out all the projectors and keeping only the natural source of light, the lamp, the window. And he said, when I was doing that rehearsal, the actor was speaking 25% lower. And I was saying, this is exactly the level. He says, and he told that to me. He said, I was hated by the sound mixer. Because in all my films, when you see I walk with a zombie and cat people, it's very rare in horror film, but the people speak very, very softly. Yeah. Mm. They whisper sometimes. And I learned that from him. I learned that importance of a light. He says you can save a shot by using a light, the backlit. So I learned a few things like that. From Raoul Walsh, when he described during a lunch that I had, how he was shooting the combat scene in Objective Burma, a total masterpiece. Objective Burma, I saw it again. It's a superb film, even if the British are ignored, and that was an Hollywood invention of having Burma conquered by the Americans. But apart from that, the film is absolutely superb. And he was saying that he was never rehearsing his action scene. Never. He was describing to the people what he wanted, and he was immediately saying, action. If it was not good, he was starting over. If there was, it was good for 25 seconds. He said, okay, I will keep and I will put the camera further on, keep that, and we start from that. So like that, he says, people were never doing twice the same thing. They were always fresh. They were always moving. They never were looking that they were eating marks. And when you see the scene in The Naked and the Dead, Objective Burma, or in his westerns, yes. It's completely, it shows that it looks so, there is a fluidity, a kind of organic fluidity, which is incredible. So I decided to do that when I did Capitaine Conan. It's how I shot all the battle scene. No rehearsal, no rehearsal. Immediately, always a take, and then we discover what's that, and we decided to use what is good and to start from there.
Just going back, because I want to come, but I just want to flash back a little bit to you were learning lots of things as a press agent, etc. But I also wanted to ask you, because there was an awful lot of political and ideological tumult during this period in the kind of 1960s. That obviously the whole Nouvelle Vague thing, and 68, happened, and how aligned, because you were learning, you were immersing yourself in contemporary movie making, but you were immersing yourself into classic filmmaking. You were learning all these things and interviewing these filmmakers and working on their new films and working on other people's new films. But how aligned or caught up or related did you feel to that kind of political kind of upsurge in the 1960s? Because it doesn't seem to be a fundamental part of your filmmaking. When you came,
a lot of them are political. I made, Clockmaker is a film which is very, very much, it has a lot of, very reminiscent of the spirit of the Condé of 68. You can see that in many, many details, in the attitude of the communist guy who is torn between the party line, which is condemning the leftists, and in fact his friendship with that was not in Simon. That was something that I bought. But I had the chance. I had my parents taught me, my father taught me a lot of things about resistance, about fighting against. He was working with the MOI, the FTP MOI, the organized group of resistance formed by the migrant workers, the foreign workers. So I had that background. And I think for 68 was for me something very important. It was destroying. It was destroying something which was stiff, which was there was something rotten. I mean, in the France of de Gaulle, with all the admiration for de Gaulle, because he was a guy, and my father was very, very Gaullist. He never was communist. He was Gaullist. But 68, it was a very healthy reaction. In the cinema, sometimes I found out that the people were becoming dogmatic, and mostly it was a little bit after 68. A lot of people and a lot of intellectuals became Maoist. And I was not. I was not tempted. And very early, I mean in 1970 or 71, I read the book of Simon Les, who was the first guy to really write those wonderful, very documented essays against Mao. I mean, Les habits neufs du président Mao, the new clothes of, based on Anderson, the story of Anderson, the new clothes of the king, the new clothes of President Mao, and Ombre chinoise. And those books prevented me of ever becoming. And one of my greatest admiration was George Orwell. Right. I've always been a super fan of George Orwell. I was reading his essay, I was reading his short story. I think the short story Shooting an Elephant is one of the most brilliant British short story. So I had that, and I think Orwell, Simon Les, so I could take everything which was good
about 68.
In 68. I mean, the woman could not, a wife could not have the right of having a license without the agreement, to drive a car without the agreement of the husband. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, French was backward. The right, the vote, the woman vote, was only imposed by de Gaulle in 45. It took a general, a French general, to impose that. No other democratic government, including the Popular Front, had imposed it. But it had become, everything was poisoned by the Algerian question, the fact that the government was saying that it was not a war, it was just a police operation, when they sent hundreds of thousands of people to fight against the Algerians. And all of that created something that, I mean, there was a reaction against, from the leftists, against the dictatorship even of the Communist Party, who wanted to rule everything. Although they were fighting for sometimes some cause which were just. So I was in the Cannes Film Festival when it closed. We had a few films. I was the president of the film which was forbidden to be projected, where people getting on the curtain. It was a film of Carlos Saura.
Yes.
Peppermint Frappé. I remember I was with Carlos, and he was there, and he had accepted the fate of his film, which would never be shown, and he was rather sad. He said, I regret because I am one of the rare persons in Spain fighting against Franco, and that was a possibility for me, for my film to be more known and to that was allowing me to go on working against the dictatorship of Franco. And so in, in the name of the revolution, they were forbidding an anti-Frankist director to screen his film. And the other film that we were working on was the third film of Milos Forman, Au Feu les Pompiers, The Fireman Ball.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which was a devastating satire on the communist dictatorship becoming completely lunatic. And I thought that there was something wrong.
Yeah.
There was something a little bit absurd in that. I thought the fight for certain values were great. And after, when all those people later on became really the slaves of the Maoism, I mean, all the intellectuals, the French, a lot of French intellectuals, and they supported Mao. The way they had supported Stalin during a lot of French intellectuals had supported Stalin until even after 1956. That was difficult. That was difficult for me. I always considered myself as being a Democrat and sometimes being very much opposed to the right wing, but sometimes I found the extreme left. I mean, all the French, most of the French intellectuals and most of the regime supported the Red Khmer, who murdered 2 million people in Cambodia. I mean, the regime, the Red Khmer, they were still at the seat in 1989 in the United Nations. I mean, like they had been overthrown in 1980 or 81 by the Vietnamese, but still 8 years after, they were still considered as the people you could talk with, forgetting that, and Valéry, the president of France, was receiving them. Same from America. People who murder more than 2 million people. I mean, and destroy the culture and destroy. I shot a film in Cambodia, and I know the devastation they did, and nobody ever apologized. I mean, of course, the worst criminals were Kissinger, who threw more bombs on Cambodia than on Nazi Germany. And the operation had lovely names. It was called Operation Breakfast, Operation Tea Time, and that was then hundreds of tons of bomb on civilian village and that. So, and Kissinger received a Nobel Award for Peace at that moment.
I remember. Yeah.
That he received it. He received it. I mean, this is. I think if we go on like that, Donald Trump will win the next.
Okay,
candidate.
I'm stopping right there because we're going to get back to the movies because we got to Watchmaker and we Judging the Assassin and I do want to.
Should we see a clip?
Yeah, we should see a clip and I'm thinking in terms of time. We have the trailer of Clockmaker, which we could show, and so let's see the trailer of Clockmaker.
I will see that.
Yeah, sit down.
So, no.
Yes. Did you cut this?
Crime pareil le soir des élections, c'est du gâteau. À moins que ce soit qu'une simple affaire de mœurs.
La camionnette 57 63 UY 69, c'est à vous?
Oui, pourquoi?
l'intérieur, ça n'a rien d'un intérieur d'ouvrier.
À moins que vous ne considériez le tir à la mitraillette comme un travail manuel.
Il arrêtait pas de nous faire des saloperies. C'était une véritable ordure. Alors, des types comme ça, je dis pas qu'il faut les tuer, mais...
Ce rason était peut-être une ordure, mais on ne tue pas les gens pour ça.
Une ordure, ça veut dire pas mal de choses, non?
Il y a aussi quelques slogans subversifs.
Oh, il y en a bien davantage dans la chambre de mon fils.
Parce qu'il est vos fils?
Non? Parce que son père est flic.
Vous êtes armé,
Toujours en mission.
vous faites un seul métier.
Le croit armé, ils ont aussi peur que lui. Seulement eux, quand ils le tuent, ils ne risquent rien.
Ne fâche pas comme ça.
Je me fâche qui je veux, nom de Dieu.
Tu la connais, la petite? Moi pas.
Non, non. Pour ce que j'ai à vous dire, il vaut mieux que vous soyez assis.
Et pourquoi? Y a pas de raison. Parce que je suis venu avec un flic.
Vous en savez autant que moi. C'est pas vrai. Vous ne pouviez pas dire autre chose.
This trailer was done by a director I mentioned in my journey to French cinema, Jean Sacha, the guy who directed a very good film with Eddie Constantine.
And did you choose him to do it?
I chose him.
You chose him to do it?
I chose him to do it because when he could not make any more films, he did some trailer. He did all the trailers of François Truffaut. And he did all of mine until Death Watch.
Wow.
I mean, so I was, and it's, I was using a director I always defended to do that was his first job. Before being a director, he was an editor, and he did, in fact, one of the first trailer in France. He did the trailer for the release of The Bride of Frankenstein. In the 30s.
Wow.
He edited the trailer of that film.
So, about just on the, because we must move on to because you started talking about lots of other films, but two things. One, I have to ask you about Simenon because, you know, in terms of us as a noir festival, and also because of French cinema and French literature, Simenon is this kind of gigantic kind of presence, and the volume of his work, the influence of his work. Were you always a fan? Was it quite clear you wanted to adapt Simenon? I mean,
I wanted to adapt. I was a great fan. But I wanted. My first film. I did not wanted something, and I could not something totally dark and desperate.
Right.
I wanted to have, and I found that book which has a hope.
Yes.
There is something at the end, reconciliation between the father and the son. So, but yes, I always admire him. I think he's extremely dense. His obsession, Simenon, was to get what he was calling the naked man, the man deprived of the close of the society, of civilization. So to get what is under this, what is the real person, that was his obsession. And he very often he got that. He was writing about characters, and I was always doing something. You had two types of crime writers in France at the time. You had James Hadichez,
Yes.
and Simon. And most of the adaptations of James Hadichez are very bad.
Yes.
They are dull, very bad, because he only writes about plot. And the plot is always about money. How to get the insurance money, how to kill somebody to get some house or the money she has. It's only about money. And it's not something human. And all the adaptation, with the exception of the film of, maybe the film of Patrick Chéreau and the film of Robert Aldrich,
Yes.
are very, very, very bad. Very bad, dull, and for most of the Simon film adapted by Simon are interesting. Yes. And right from the 30s, why? Because the good directors already understood they had a character, they had a conflict, there was something really interesting. Even in the Maigret,
Yes.
In the Maigret you have that. I mean, deep inside you have an emotion. That which is so. Yes, I wanted to do that.
I do think though, and I do think that, and people may disagree with me here, but I do think that the problem with Simenon is, in a sense, Maigret, because there's so many television series and so many dull television series made from Maigret, you know, and we've had endless amounts of them in Britain. There's one now that's, you know, being made by ITV with a very famous British comic actor, which I personally think is awful.
Yeah, but some of the films,
some of the films are great.
Some of the films, I mean, the Duvivier film, La Tête d'un Homme, is very, very good. Renoir film is interesting, La Nuit du Carrefour. The two Simon with Jean Gabin, the third one is bad. But the two Simon, especially the first one, Maigret étant un piège, is a wonderful thriller, wonderful film noir, very well written by Michel Audiard. Very, but Maigret, I mean, there were several Maigret which were, I mean, the American never succeeded. I mean, The Man on the Eiffel Tower is very, very bad, and Charlotten is very hammy in it, something that Maigret should not be. Maigret is a kind of, is very, very dense, is laconic, is looking. Jean Orange, very bright mind, said, Maigret is not a cop, he's a novelist. And he absorbs an atmosphere. So you get that. And I thought that was very, very rare. Yeah. And I asked Simon if he wanted to do to play Maigret in a film I would direct.
Really?
I had decided I would have him play Maigret, which I think was a very, very intelligent idea. But he said no, that he was not an actor. But I thought that was very smart to cast him as Maigret, because Maigret, what he does mostly is looking, absorbing, trying to understand the soul. And Duvivier understood that. Duvivier understood that so well that he had a scene of where Maigret was questioning a suspect. And Duvivier, like many French directors, had written the lyrics of a song. And he decided to use that song, which is sung by somebody in an hotel room very, very next to the room where Maigret is. And with that, he cut all the dialogue. So you have one shot, which lasts about 3 minutes, where Maigret looks at the guy, and you hear the song, and the suspect says, she sings well. And Maigret, you know her? And he says, I've never seen her. And it's when Maigret knows that he is a murderer. I mean, this is an incredibly modern scene. I mean, having that no dialogue, and you feel, because Harry Bohr is one of the most underrated actors now. He's a genius. I mean, it makes you feel that, and that you have that with Simon.
And obviously, from what you said, the fact that you asked him to play Maigret in a film you would make, so you got to know Simenon a little bit.
I never met him, by correspondence.
By correspondence.
I mean, I wrote him so many letters because he always said that he wanted to be paid and he was never giving a free option. And the money he was asking was always the same. Always the same. It was never changed. But I wrote him so many letters that at the end he said, yes, okay, you have 1 year of free option, right, which he renewed. And then he said in an interview that he had liked the film.
Oh, he did say he liked the film.
Yeah,
That's
he
good.
liked the film very much. And then he sent me his daughter. His daughter came to me and played a small part in my second film.
Fantastic.
Marie-Jo Simon, who killed herself after. Killed herself very young. That was a very bizarre family. I mean, Simon.
So moving on, what you made The Watchmaker, you made Judge and the Assassin, which we also have the trailer from, and we can show, and what led you, because this is obviously a different kind of exploration of crime and noir, because it's a period film, it's about a historical true incident. And were you researching? Did you stumble across this extraordinary story? I mean, how did you find out about the kind of 19th century serial killer?
When I was working with Pierre Bost, Jean Orange was somewhere else at that moment, so I was talking with Pierre Bost, and I asked him if he had, because Orange was completely disorganized. He never had archive, he was losing everything. Bost was very, very organized. He was a Protestant, that very straight, wonderful man. His father had been a Protestant minister, had correspondence with Joseph Conrad.
Wow.
Yeah. And Bost himself had been work at Gallimard, where he discovered several important writers. And he was a very good novelist himself. So I asked Bost, have you ever written a screenplay that you like and which has never been produced? And he said, yes, we wrote something, a long treatment, in 1948. And we never got it made. It called The Judge and the Assassin. And he showed me the treatment. And he gave me, he said, he gave me the book written by the judge on that affair. So I had that. And I thought, this is a wonderful thing. If I can expand it, because it was written, I had, for instance, the first third of the film was not in the screenplay. Right. All the wandering of Bouvier all around France, that was not in the screenplay.
Maybe we should see the trailer for this, which probably has been cut by the same person. If you know.
Yeah.
So let's see that.
L'assassin ne communiera jamais avec nos enfants.
L'assassin, il est arrêté, l'assassin. Il est sous les verrous.
Vous êtes un roublard, monsieur le juge. C'est grand malheur. Votre seule manière d'agir me fait prendre pitié de vous.
Une innocente ne peut troubler qu'un homme profondément corrompu.
Autant aujourd'hui que demain.
Rousseau, assassin! Rousseau, assassin! Rousseau!
Il dit que nous sommes tous des meurtriers au moins en puissance. Mais ce besoin du crime, nous le canalisons par des moyens légaux.
Comment vous sentez-vous, Bouvier?
Innocent, mon juge, puisque c'est Dieu qui a tout voulu.
T'avais une grande dévotion pour la Vierge.
C'est la femme de tous ceux qui n'en ont pas.
C'est un paysan rusé qui essaie de me rouler et moi, je fais semblant de marcher.
Moi, ça fait 2 ans que je marche à travers la France comme un forcené. Et le soleil qui frappait ma pauvre tête.
Si c'était pas vrai, s'il inventait tout ça.
C'est tout de même un anormal.
Si on ne guillotinait pas ces anormaux, ce serait le bordel.
Il pleure.
On croirait des larmes.
Et s'il pleurait l'ami qui l'a trahi?
Quel ami?
It was in CinemaScope. I didn't even know that they did
a cropped version of it.
Yeah, because the film is made to use CinemaScope. I mean, all the film I made, each one was at a new challenge. So I made 3 films with Noiret. I chose 3 different periods: contemporary, 18th century, 19th century. He plays 3 different characters. An ordinary man today, a prince of the blood in the 18th century, and an intelligent judge bourgeois of the 19th century. And the last film I made it in Panavision widescreen. I was the first person to use the new lens they had, which were using very, very little light. I could open at 2, which was nothing for the night scene. And 2, the scope was very, very important for the close-up, but also for the landscape, because you have a lot of real location and very splendid photography by Pierre William Glenn. And great music by Philippe Sard. And the music was recorded before the making of the film.
And which means that everyone, because there is a lovely box set that Studio Canal put out of a number of Bertrand's films, so to see the film as it should be seen, not cropped like that, you'll have to watch it properly. Yeah. But actually, it's interesting about those collaborators, because first off, Noiret obviously became, you'd gone to him, you knew him because of, as you said, Murphy's War, but he obviously became a close creative collaborator. I mean,
he was my brother, my elder brother. He was my, I said he's my autobiographical actor. I absolutely loved him as a human being.
How many films did you make together? You made 8 films, that's right. And he's
during The Clockmaker, during 2 years, we tried to finance the film, and we were rejected by everybody, very violently, very rudely, and he was always with me. Always. He was coming with me. We were insulted. Some producers just weighed the screenplay and said, no, I cannot do that.
It's too heavy.
It will be too long, and it's too heavy. And one day, when I succeeded in making A Clockmaker, I said, but Philip, why did you stay all those years with me? I could have, after 8 months, I would have understood if you said, I tried, we cannot do it. He said, I'd given my word. That was Philippe Noiret. And I mean, we were like that.
And how did you work together? I mean, in terms of what, you know, we were joking earlier on about, you know, Shelley Duvall talking about Kubrick and how many takes he would have. And
very few takes. I hate to do many takes. I love to have a spontaneity. Sometimes you are forced to do that, and with some actors it's better to do 2 or 3 more takes. I mean, it's always, you have always to be prepared. But I spend little film. I do not cover myself. I've practically nothing, which is on the editing room when I edit. Right. I edit I shoot. It's edited as it's shot most of the time, except sometimes there is, as in my film, they're never too plotty. So you have moments where they are rather free. So my editor used to say there is always a difficult Bob Reel 7. he invented the number, but there was a reel where sometimes we could change the order of the scenes, not cutting in time, but changing the order, because they got, and sometimes the film were always changing, evolving during the direction. Like in many films, the ending is not the ending which was in the script. Right. The ending changed during the making of the film. Like Sunday in the Country, Life and Nothing But, Beatrice, It All Starts Today.
Well, when you say during the making film, do you actually mean during the shooting of the film?
During the shooting, I suddenly realized at the ending of Sunday in the Country, I had shot it. I don't think it was good, and I thought I made a mistake. We came to a point of the story where we must not talk anymore about familial relationship. It has been dealt with. We must go somewhere else. And I decided to have the painter come back to his house, be in his studio, take a look at what he was painting, decide that it's not good enough, so following his daughter, taking off, taking a blank canvas, putting it, and looking at it. And something new will be started. So that was all improvised on an afternoon. It was not in the screenplay. Yeah. At the end of Life and Nothing But, normally, Sabine Azema and Philippe Noiret were leaving each other. And during the making, I always edit during the making. And when I saw the scene edited, all the scenes between Noiret and Sabine, I said, but they cannot leave each other. It's impossible. It has been this is abstract. That was decided before they were acting. So it took us a while. Jean Cosmos wrote several endings, and then I came with the idea of a letter that Noiret is writing to Sabine. I wrote a first draft. My co-writer, Jean Cosmos, took it and did. When I received it, I thought that was a gift. The way it transformed my idea and made one of the most moving love letters I think I've ever heard on the screen. And really moving. The words he wrote. I mean, I was lucky enough to work with extremely talented screenwriters. And you have noticed that in the trailer of The Clockmaker, I put the name of the screenwriters.
Which doesn't happen in trailers, no.
For me, it's important. That doesn't mean I always believe that a film, the film is made by the director. But the importance of the writer are enormous. And I was lucky enough to choose some very, very good screenwriters, whether they were people who have been working a lot before or new, because I started the career of many people who had never written anything before working with me, including a cop in L627.
We'll come on to that, but just let's go back to the, because we've gone through, you're managing to make films every few years in the 1970s, and then it seems to me, and we must talk about Coup de Jour because this is the extraordinary film. We've actually got a clip from this. But it seems to me, and you've talked about, you've just referenced Sunday in the Country, but there's this period which sort of, from 1980 right through the kind of, which is an extraordinary purple patch where you're making films very frequently, and you're making extremely diverse films, and you're incredibly prolific during this period. It seems that the 1980s were an amazingly prolific period in your filmmaking career, where you...
It's out of luck. It's because I was lucky enough to... I always had a lot of subjects, but I had a good relationship with some distributors. Working with Alain Sard, who was very, very, very nice. I mean, there are so many factors, so many things we went us in the making of the film, which will explain why a film was postponed of 2 years. So luck is very important, although that I think basically you create your own luck. But so many accidents can happen. I mean, around midnight came out of an accident, a meeting with Irwin Winkler, a discussion between Irwin, Martin Scorsese and myself. And we had been working as press agent on some films of Irwin, Leo the Last, for instance, and The Shoot Horses, and Taxi Driver. No, he didn't. I don't think he did Taxi Driver. And Irwin says, if you were free to choose a subject, what would you do? And Martin said, The Last Temptation of Christ. And I said, there is a photograph of Lester Young in the Hotel Louisiana.
The great jazz musician.
Yeah, sitting on a bed, and he's looking, and I would love to try to find out what he's looking at. And so he's in a kind of seedy hotel room, expatriate. And he called me back. He says, are you serious about the idea of a jazz musician in Paris in the 60s? I said, yes, I'm serious. And he says, well, okay, it's a deal. You'll write a screenplay. So I pick up David Rayfield, the screenwriter of Sidney Pollack, somebody I adored. I adore David. I had done Death Watch with him in Glasgow.
Yeah, that's your British film.
Yeah, my British film.
Yeah.
Scottish.
You're Scottish, okay.
Scottish.
They're still part of the UK.
Yeah. The film was not produced by any, co-produced by any British producer, including David Putnam and Sandy Liberson, because they said that in Glasgow you will be mugged. I will be murdered. That will be horrible. So we don't want to help a film shot in Glasgow. That was one of the happiest shoots I ever had in my life. I had the whole framework.
This is 1980. 1980.
1980. Yeah. The people were always welcoming us. They were invited everywhere.
It's probably because Sandy
French.
and David were going to get mugged because they were Brits. You were French.
Yeah, maybe they would have gotten mugged. And the worst thing that could happen to us is people telling us, why did your king let us down on the Battle of the Boyne? He says, I'm not responsible. I don't want to be judged on that. He says, you let us, you did not came to our support. I mean, that was a few centuries ago.
Yeah,
that was the worst thing that happened to. It was a Scottish film, and a lot of Scottish actors from the theatre, a lot of, including a guy Robbie Coltrane.
Yeah.
That was his first film.
Yeah.
He's playing a small part, and they discovered Robbie Coltrane.
Yeah. But he was the screenwriter from Death Watch, which also was
screenwriter of Sidney Pollack.
Was Sidney Pollack, who you
very often uncredited. I knew by Sidney that he had written a lot of films without having his credit.
Right.
Always, Sidney was calling when a film was not working, and so he could fix the screenplay.
Right.
Like he wrote nearly half, even 2/3 of Jeremiah Johnson,
right,
without having his name. He always told me that Milius contributed to the idea, the main idea, and one line, brilliant line. He says, "Where are the Rocky Mountains?" He says, "You go straight, you turn left." That was a line by John Milius, which is very, very funny. And said the other screenwriter, a couple, what was the name? It's a couple, husband and wife. Anhalt,
right.
Edward and Edna Anhalt. They said the only idea is bring the cavalry. But it's David who had the idea of the cavalry going through the Indian graveyard, which create a danger. I mean, it's something very, very bad they should not have done. I mean, but David mostly wrote, I mean, the silent scenes, very little dialogue between Redford and the Indian wife and the baby. And David was he was somebody completely unique. He introduced me to a lot of poets, to Wallace Stevens, to Willa Cather. To Willa Cather. He always had he was repeating something that Cather wrote, that whatever is on the page, without being specifically named, that can be called creation. Wonderful life, wonderful beauty. And I discovered with him My Antonia. We thought about trying to adapt My Antonia. I wanted very much to adapt My Antonia. But at that time, the Willa Cather estate refusing to sell the rights for filmmakers. I think it changed 10 or 15 years after. But for me, it's one of the greatest American novel, My Antonia.
So you called him and asked him to write the screenplay for Around Midnight.
Yeah. I had met him during the shooting of Bobby Deerfield. Yeah. He was there on the set. He was not so much writing on it, but he was there just to answer the question of Al Pacino. Right. Because Pollack could not stand anymore because Pacino was asking 200 questions a day. So David was just there to listen to the question and answer. Do I say, is it and or is it just we take out and we can have a beat? So I was seeing that and I said, even if they give me $2 million, I don't want to make a film like that. I don't want to be able to, and I think now, Pacino became, who is a superb actor.
Yes.
But I've seen him on the set of Revolution.
Yes.
With Hugh Godson.
Yes.
When Hugh Godson said, you are running there to hide behind the wall. And he says, why? He said, and Hugh Godson said, a whole army is shooting at you. Yeah, he said, but this is not enough. I've been in war this is my 20th day, 30th day, this is my first day. I mean, just running and jumping behind a wall. I mean, it was 2 hours discussion for that. But
you didn't. I mean, but interestingly, on Round Midnight, you decide, I mean, obviously, because you wanted authenticity, you decided to work with a non-actor, essentially, in terms of a legendary musician,
because
Dexter Gordon.
I love music.
Yes.
And even if I think Robert De Niro is one of the greatest actors in the world, when he's playing in New York, I can very well see that he doesn't know the music. He's not reacting to a note like a musician. He's not. There is things that a musician will bring you things that or you must have an actor who knows very well the music, who can play music. That happened. And Dexter was bringing a thing which was so unexpected in the delivery of a line, but even when he was playing, a smile to the drum player, because Billy Higgins had found a note which was pleasing him. I mean, if you don't know the music, you cannot get, and for me, that will make the difference. That, because we shot all the scenes of Round Midnight, they were recorded live. We took the risk of, and that was part of the subject, that the fact that Dexter could be not in shape and is not at his greatest at some moment, but that part of the story. The musicians sometimes arrive for a gig, and they are drunk, and they don't play very well. But even when they don't play very well, when they are great musicians, there is something which I mean, Lester Young, who was completely broken at the end of it. I mean, but some of his last recordings, they are not perfect. But they are so incredibly poignant and moving that it's better than perfect. I mean, his version of "They Can't Take That Away From Me" at the clarinet is, for me, I cry every time I hear that.
Going back before Round Midnight, because to bring it back to the kind of crime genre for a minute, Coup de Torchon, which we're going to show a clip of in a second. This is, I mean, this, you know, for me, this is one of the great adaptations of a noir novelist in terms of Jim Thompson, and the fact that you took Pop 1280, you took an American, absolutely, you know, vernacular American crime novelist, and you transplant the whole story. You transplant it completely from the United States. You don't even put it in France. You put it in colonial France in terms of, you know, Africa, and it's a radical reinterpretation, and yet it's absolutely, utterly recognisable as Jim Thompson. I think it's an incredible achievement. What led you to wanting to do Thompson in that way?
I was, and I'm still a great admirer of Thompson. I loved his work, and I discovered very early on Pop 1280, translated in French by 1275 âmes. So they took out 5 persons. You have 5 less persons in the French title. And a French novelist made a novel about that, trying to discover what happened to those 5 persons. And I tried for many years to adapt it. I tried in France, different period, 1920, 1930, in the north of France, in the Alps. It was never working. And one day I was rereading Louis Ferdinand Céline, the voyage, the long voyage into the night, and the description of the colonial company. And I immediately thought, but this is Jim Thompson. This is the same terrible violence, the same oppression, the same racial bigotry and hate. And so I immediately thought of Africa. And I called Jean Ranche because I knew that he had been very often in colonial Africa. And he knew that. He knew. And I needed somebody who knew, not somebody who had read about, somebody who had experience and memories. So we wrote the screenplay, and then yes, the film was a huge hit. It received great reviews. I mean, also in America, one of the best reviews I've ever, and one of the most pleasing, rewarding, was an essay by Donald Westlake, a writer I adore.
Yeah.
I adore.
And a lovely man,
who said the best adaptation of Jim Thompson was made by a Gallic director. It's the most faithful, the most intelligent, the most deepest. And he says, and I did one. He said, because I wrote the adaptation of The Grifters, and it's less good than that Bertrand Tavernier did on Couture. So Donald Westlake, I had two novelists who praised this adaptation. The other is a Spanish writer. I don't know if he's known in England. A very, very good crime specialist, I mean, called Manuel Vasquez Montalban.
Oh yes, he is. Yeah, he is. Yeah.
And Manuel wrote in a literary magazine. He said, "It would be the dream of any good writer to be adapted so intelligently in the cinema that Thompson was by Bertrand Tavernier." So having Manuel Vasquez Montalban and Donald Westlake, which I consider those people more interesting than some film critics. I mean, because they know more. They have they have a knowledge about what the material.
Well, it's a certain serendipity, and actually brings us right back to what I was saying at the beginning about Shot in the Dark, because Donald Westlake was a guest here in the 1990s of the original Shots in the Dark. So it's a lovely little connection between the festival and you and him.
And he wrote a great book about Africa, Donald Westlake, called Kawa or something
yes,
like that.
He did, yes.
Which is about, it's about Imin Dada.
Yeah.
It's a great book. Very biting, I never understood why it was not adapted, because it's a very tough and great novel.
They all seem to get stuck on the Parker ones. Let's see this clip of Coup d'etat.
Yeah. Point Blank was Westlake. No?
That's great. John Wall.
Oh!
A bit more.
Combien de fois on t'a dit que t'avais rien à foutre au panier chouette?
C'est mon boulot de rien foutre. Je suis payé pour ça.
Eh ben, va-t'en rien foutre ailleurs qu'ici, grosse feignasse.
Quand même. Vous y allez un peu fort, là.
Qu'est-ce qu'il te prend?
Les mains en l'air.
Oh, si ça peut te faire plaisir.
Ce qui me ferait plaisir, c'est que vous me chantiez une
Still
chanson.
needs to be louder.
Non mais tu rigoles.
Catharinette Tabelle, là, par exemple. Vous l'aimez?
Ah oui, on l'aime bien, celle-là, ça tombe bien. Et t'avais pas besoin de sortir ton arme.
Allez-y.
Et range ton revolver, on risque de chanter faux.
Je compte jusqu'à 3. 1, 2.
Tu n'as que 16 ans, et faut comme tu affoles déjà tous les hommes.
Je suis déçu. Je m'attendais à mieux. Vous me gâchez un peu mon plaisir.
Ça va finir cette plaisanterie.
Attends, on peut faire mieux.
Est-ce ton œil si doux qui l'émine, ou bien les rondeurs de ta poitrine qui les rend fous? Ah, Catharinetta belle, tch, tch, écoute, l'amour t'appelle, tch, tch. Pourquoi dire non maintenant? Ah, ah, faut profiter quand il est temps. Ah, ah, plus tard quand tu seras vieux. Chut.
Levez, Lucien.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Allez, va voir ce que c'est.
What I like about that scene is that it captures just in the singing before he kills them, it captures that grotesque and kind of absurdist humour of Thompson, which I think is one of the most difficult things to actually conjure. That because the irony in Thompson is so powerful, the satire in Thompson is so powerful.
The satire, the comic, the comic and the metaphysic in Thompson. It's always hidden. It's there, and it's very, very difficult. And the first adaptation of Thompson were completely ignoring that.
Yes.
Completely, they were just adapting the plot. Thompson is full of traps. It's full of. He's writing quickly, so sometimes the plot have holes. You must get rid of those holes. But he had irony. I mean, he told us, I mean, his masters were Cervantes and Karl Marx, which is a very interesting mix for a pulp writer. Yeah. And Richard Wright also. Richard Wright. And it's, you have that, you have an incredible, say, absurd comic thing. I mean, which one of the great things is a line that the character is repeating all the time, which is, he says, "What are you going to do?" He says, "Yes, I've been thinking about that and thinking and thinking and thinking. And after I've been thinking, spending hours returning this idea, in my head, I have decided that I was not going to do anything." So you have that long moment to come from the non-decision. Yeah. And you have something that you must keep in mind. In Thompson, he's using sometimes a line in italics, which is saying the opposite of what is said in the previous sentence. And you must keep that. You have in a book called A Hell of a Woman, yes. The ending is only made about that. The ending, you have it's told by the first person. The guy says things are doing now much better. I'm feel better. I'm cured. I'm no more. I don't use any more drug. And in Italy, I'm taking a lot. I live in a beautiful apartment. It's a stinking rat hole. I mean, so everything, and this is incredibly difficult.
Yes.
To adapt.
Yeah.
To adapt that. And I did that in Coup de Torchon, having at the end, I decided to use the eclipse of the sun. I decided to add at the end something completely metaphysical, which was not in the book, but that was a way of getting what was in the book, that the spirit behind that. And the fact also that nothing is politically correct. Mm-hmm. I mean, he wants to get under your skin to get the nerves, which is the most, where it will be at the really vital and most violent. I mean, when I showed the film in Telluride, you had some wonderful liberals which were very offended by the fact that the character Noir kills a black guy, was saying, you know, I kill you because you kissed the ass of the white person and you deserve to die. And you should be very pleased because one always kills the people you love the most, and he kills him. And this is, when it's, there I took the whole dialogue of Thompson.
Yes. This
is the dialogue of Thompson. I mean, it's, and so everything came alive in Senegal. And
what was it like shooting there?
Oh, wonderful, very easy. That was one film which went incredibly well. I mean, incredibly, a very happy shoot. Lovely food, great atmosphere. I had two singers, Eddie Mitchell and Guy Marchand. And when they were singing all the songs of Bing Crosby, imitating. I mean, so that was very good during the night. And, they were great. Eddie Mitchell is a great rock singer, country, and Guy Marchand is a great crooner. And so we are having a lot of fun. They were making contests, remembering the song of Sinatra and Crosby, and singing them, and so that was wonderful.
I would never have thought Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra on the set of Coup de Torchon.
I mean, everything can happen on my set. I love to get a happy mood, so I organize crossword puzzles on the call sheet, and we are always trying to make tests, to have jokes, to invent rumor of people sleeping with other people. I mean, that's I want a shoot to be happy. Most of the time I succeed. Sometimes when you shoot in Paris, it's more difficult, right? Because you have to go home and you are facing the problem with the washing machine and the thing like that. All the things you do not want. I was understanding Melville when he was shooting or preparing a film or shooting a film. He was going to live in a hotel.
Yes.
Because you don't want to be facing anything which will distract you from the film.
Well, but that brings us, you know, that sort of jumping forward and missing out lots of great films. But to L627, because if Coup de Torchon was a kind of radical reinterpretation of a master kind of crime pulp novelist, this strikes me as being this isn't jazz. Maybe it is jazz. It's rock and roll. This is like a verite. It's almost like a punk rock movie where you're you're just diving into very contemporary, very realistic, very verite, authentic, and it strikes me as being a very angry film.
It was angry about the way that the cops were depicted in many French TV series, where they were always, the set were wonderful, the places to work was beautiful sets, and again the film happened as a kind of accident. I wanted to do a film about the cop, and my son Niels had just acted in a film, and he was playing a young cop, and his advisor was a real cop.
Right,
And he told me, I met somebody who was very interesting. Do you want to have dinner with him? I said yes. And I had dinner with that guy who was an investigator working against drug dealers. I mean, I said, what we call a dealer casse-croûte. The dealer was sent, not the people who are having 100 of kilos of heroin at the frontier, but the people selling 20 grams in the street or in the subway. And he had been working for several years. And he started to tell me stories. And I have never seen the police like that. Because a lot of French film, the French crime film about the police were very much imitated Melville. And Melville was imitating the American films. And his cops were not French cops. Right. I mean, the place where they were working were not like that. And so the imitation of an imitation was becoming the reality. Right. And suddenly I was discovering something different. Mm-hmm. And I came, he took me to the place they were working, which it was called the first DPG in a former hospital, not far from the Champs-Élysées. And they were working in 2 shacks, but really shacks, where it was raining inside when it was raining. The table and the chair had things they had found in the garbage collected. Nothing was the same. They didn't have 2 similar chairs. It was incredibly hot. The road, it was not paved, so it was very dusty. You know? And I discovered that, and that was a shock. And I said, my God, we have never seen that in a film. I want to show that. I was hearing the Minister of the Interior says our priority is fight against the drug dealing. And then the people who were fighting were working in conditions that I think no workers would accept. I mean, that was reminded me of the people in the trench during the First World War. I mean, spending their life in the mud, having no real food, freezing cold. When the Germans had some real shelter built, they had been for 2 years. It was made out of cement, and the French general who knew that, it took them 1.5 years to react to that news. That the fact that the Germans were building things which were very safe for the soldiers and not the French. I mean, and it was the same for the cop. And it seemed that no minister was knowing that. They were working, the car were not working well. And to get, they never had the money even to buy the battery in the radio, so they were buying themselves with the pocket money. Some of them did not know the rules. The leader was totally, had been very, very stupid and dumb, and I decided to keep that. But as in the police, the promotion is done with the number of years, so that guy who was inefficient, bad, stupid, would be promoted and would get more power in 2 years, when the people who were really doing the job would not be promoted. And after the dinner, I said to Michel Alexandre, what you told me is very... Could you write...
Michel Alexandre was the cop.
I said, could you write things? I would like... if you could write a few scenes, no plot, don't think about a plot. Just give me 10 scenes without an order. I mean, an investigation, a raid or something, the way you arrest somebody. No link where you are. And immediately, when he gave me the page, I saw the dialogue was terrific. He had a ear for dialogue, for the vocabulary seemed very, very right. The behavior of the guy, of the people, was something completely new to me. I've never seen that in any movie. So I said, okay, we are working together. And we wrote about, he wrote like 60 scenes, and then I took them, I found an order, I combined them, I found a beginning, middle, and then we waited to get the end, and we wrote everything that way, and the film was very much attacked by the Minister of the Interior. Very, very much
You must
attacked.
have been so pleased that...
I mean, he was... no, because we had decided to organize a lot of screening with real cops to talk to... And he stopped that. He forbid that.
Oh, really?
And so we had to cancel at least 200 screenings all over France because of it. And he said that at the end, he received so many calls. I mean, the cops were calling the radio station saying, we have seen that film, everything is true. One of them said, I felt I did 2 hours of overtime. Watching that film, which is one of the greatest compliments I ever received.
Let's see the clip. Let's see the clip before we talk about it anymore.
Sound.
Sound. That's it. That's it. Still needs to be louder.
Louder.
Louder, louder.
Vas-y vite, cassez la gueule.
Bon, allez, on avance. Viens vite.
Ça va l'artiste? Dis, au cas où tu saurais pas, les autoradios doivent être restitués à leurs propriétaires légitimes, si possible en état de marche.
Mais ouais, où tu vas, toi? Putain, mais c'est pas vrai, ils me pètent le matos et après, je suis sûr qu'ils vont me faire porter le chapeau, là, c'est con, là.
Dis, ça c'est pour la politesse. Et tu remontes ton froc ou je t'en colle une deuxième. Compris?
Hé, Jean-Marc.
Ouais, qu'est-ce que tu veux?
T'as un suicide par défenestration, 24 rue Comartin. Les flicards attendent sur place.
Putain, les gens peuvent pas attendre 9 heures avant de se flinguer.
Écoute, c'est pas parce qu'il est PDG d'une multinationale qu'il va nous pourrir la matinée. De toute façon, son piston a bombé la moitié du radio métro. C'est pas une journée de garde avec qui va le tuer. Non, pire, il sera dehors à 18h. Non, il est toujours chez nous. Un quart va te le monter avec le début de la procédure. D'accord. Enfin, te fais pas de soucis, hein. Ça va bien carillonner du côté du cabinet préfet dans l'heure qui suit. Ok, je te laisse. Bye. Moi, c'est plus le 11e arrondissement, hein. Le 8e et le 16e, ce sont des secteurs, disons, minés, quoi. Alors, on a fait ça mauvaise tête. Ça fait un bail depuis les lots salons. Ben, je suis bien content de vous récupérer. Ben, moi aussi.
Oh, pardon. Tenez, c'est la procédure des 2 fourgues. On les déverse ce matin.
Remarque, t'as oublié ton macabé?
Bonjour.
Plus impatient.
Ok, il va pas s'envoler.
Ah si, justement.
Justement quoi, le fort?
Eh ben, le suicidé, patron. Il a voulu s'envoler.
Eh ben, vous auriez quand même pu essayer de les loger, hein? Au lieu de les serrer bêtement de suite.
Ouais, bien sûr. Ouais. Vous savez, patron, il était pas facile à suivre aussi, hein.
Ouais. Mais je dis essayer. C'est-à-dire se donner un peu plus de mal. Tenez, vous direz à Brideau qu'il a oublié de signer des PV d'audition. Mais fait le contrôle d'affaires réussi?
Ah oui, bien sûr.
Le fort. Puisque vous m'avez l'air de bonne humeur ce matin, vous allez arracher Plantier à la préparation de son tiercé et vous transporter sur les lieux de suicide. Vous avez 2 minutes. Vous allez voir le groupe. Il y a du chiffre, mais il faut remonter la qualité des affaires.
Et comme moyen?
Ça s'améliore. On vient de toucher une mobilette.
Elle roule?
Alors là, Dodo, ma nuit, t'as pas loupé, hein, ça va faire mal.
Tu aimes?
Ouais.
Salut. C'est ici les stupes. Eh ben voilà, je m'appelle Marguerite. Je viens travailler avec vous, enfin, si vous voulez bien.
Tiens, moi c'est Dominique Henriot, dit Dodo. Et j'ai le malheur d'être le chef de ces baltringues. Mais je ne me laisse pas faire, même pas par Manu.
Ah, Dodo, ça va mal finir, fais attention. T'es un véritable âne, hein?
Et ça, c'est Diop Mamadou, dealer de son état, très gentil garçon. Quand on sait lui parler. Pas vrai, Mamadou?
Salut. Antoine Cantoni, dit Looping, ou Tonio, ou la Belette, enfin, comme tu veux.
Bienvenue, Emmanuel. Tu tombes mal, le chef à sa crise.
Tu ferais mieux de tout avouer. Mais on sait que tu dis, l'espèce d'abruti. Tout le monde nous l'a dit. Hein? Alors c'est pas toi qui vas dire le contraire.
Je te jure, chef. Je te jure que je ne veux pas. Tu dois te tromper, chef.
Tu te fous de ma gueule? Commence par apprendre que je ne me trompe jamais. Tu comprends ça, Mamadou? Jamais! 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 Vous êtes témoin, les gars, il s'est cassé la gueule tout seul. Alors, t'as réfléchi, Mamadou? C'est bien toi qui vendais?
Je te dis, chef, moi, travail. Moi, la drogue, jamais. Jamais la drogue.
T'es vraiment un sale menteur. T'as pensé à ta mère? Quand chez toi, au village, tout le monde va savoir que tu vends de la drogue. Est-ce que t'y as pensé un seul instant? Hein? Et ton père? Quelle honte va s'abattre sur lui. Jamais tu réfléchis à ça, Mamadou? Hé, Mamadou. Et Dieu? T'y as pensé à Dieu? Il te regarde, lui. Il a vu que tu vendais. Dieu, personne le baise, il voit tout. Tu vas casquer, tu sais. Tu vas casquer!
On se prend un café?
Hein? Ah oui, oui.
Ok.
Just a little snippet, the L607. I realise we're running out of time because we've got to have a little break before Bertrand comes back and kindly introducing the Electric Mist. So I think I'm going to stop asking questions for now, and I'm going to open it up for 15 minutes in case you have questions. I'm sure you do. And we've got I think we've got microphones here. So if somebody wants to put their hand up and ask a question of Bertrand, please feel free, and I'll redirect it to you. But just wait for the microphone to get to you. So, I mean, I can carry on talking for the next half an hour to Bertrand, but this is a very rare opportunity to ask him questions yourself. So please fire away. Question there.
I'd like to... Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how you found cinema in America when you went there.
How did you find cinema in America when you went to America, when you first went to America?
That depends how I find what. I met many directors which were great. Working there was difficult. It's why I never wanted to do the adaptation of Thompson in America. I knew I was not ready to deal with the American system. I did that later on when I did Around Midnight.
Yes.
I found it more bureaucratic than you would think.
Yeah.
John le Carré said America is like Russia, but the people have their pants pressed. That's the only difference. And it's there is something true about it. I think the system in America, I think the crew are enormous.
Yeah.
Enormous. I mean, the French crew I do film with 1/3. I mean, just for instance, the gaffers, the electrician, the gaffers.
Yes, the gaffers. Yeah.
I have four people in the crew, 5 in something of when you do a period film like Montpensier, like The Princess. But on this film, on L607, there were 3. On the Electric Mist, there were 14. 14. But as my DP was saying, I had one brain, somebody who has half a brain, and I have 12 porters, just people who carry.
Yeah.
That's all. In France, have 4 persons, but you have a chief, but the 3 others are formed, they want to become chief.
Yeah.
So they are studying the way you light, and they very quickly understand the way a DP is working, and so they are anticipating. And especially in America, they have rules which are completely stupid. Like the shutters are not on the projector, are not put by the gaffers, but by the grip.
Oh, the grip, yeah.
But the grip know nothing about lighting. And that doesn't make sense.
No.
So the DP always has to come back because the grip do not put the shutters well. They do not find a good angle. They are not. That is not their job. I mean, you have plenty of rules like that, which are. Apart from that, you have people, individual people, who are superb.
Yeah.
The actor always come with knowing everything. I mean, they are used to work, especially in television, with people who are not directing them.
Yeah.
So they prepare. They are completely prepared.
Right.
I mean, working with all of them. That's and I met people who. I met one of the best sound engineer. I met a great operator and Steadicam operator, which I use after in The Princess of Montpensier.
Exactly.
Yeah. I took him in France. A great composer, Marco Beltrami, great composer. So you have people, but on the whole, the crew is heavy. They are not moving fast. I mean, Bruno de Kayser, when doing Electric Mist, was always saying this is l'armée des Indes. It's like the army in India, the British army. We are moving slowly. And it's true. And they have rules which are horrible, like the penalty meal. That when you are doing a scene, every 6 hours you must give a meal where the people are seated. Yeah. And in France, it's about the same rule, but if you have not finished a scene, you will ask the crew, are you giving me half an hour to finish? Because that will finish the setup, the place you will be. All my film, I've had that, they always say yes, because sometimes that helps them. We finish the scene, then they can take out the material. Here, we are only allowed to finish the shot.
Right.
And then we have to stop. And if we go on, there will be a penalty where we'll pay a sum which will double every 11 minutes. And I remember that Tony Scott, the brother of Ridley, when he did Déjà Vu in New Orleans, he hated stopping for meal. He hated. So he ignored the penalty. And so the people were paid, he was paying them. And the guy, I mean, the key grip and the key electrician, they told me that one of them won $98,000 in 2 weeks, just with the penalty meal. The penalty meal, which means when you have a crew of 200 persons, that explains that a film can cost 125 million when you have that kind of things. I mean, that when you are paying just $90,000 for 2 weeks.
It's extraordinary.
I mean, so that makes things difficult.
And you're about to, but you are preparing to
Yeah,
make your new film is going to be in America.
Yeah, and I know now I can anticipate some of the problems. Can anticipate.
Another question somebody would like to ask. Here.
Excuse me, sir. I wondered if you'd seen the film Redoubtable, and if so, what was your reaction to the portrayal of Jean-Luc Godard in that film?
I like the film very much. I think Michel Hazanavicius is a very gifted director. I think Louis Garrel, it's terrific in the film. And I like the tone because it's amusing, it's a satire, but at the same time there is a kind of admiration for but I found it, I find it very, very enjoyable, and very true, except that that Michel Cournot, in a scene, was much more elegant than the actor who portrays him, and which I think is, but it's a mistake only for me because I knew very well when they are in the great scene where they are talking in the car coming back from Cannes, which is a very, very good scene. I found, of course, all the people who are worshipping and mostly sometimes ignoring the film of Godard that Godard made for when he was Maurice. They are lousy. They are horrible. They are the opposite of the great masterpiece that Godard made at the beginning and after, when he came back to his, when he stopped being a Maoist. I mean, and it's still the Maoists are the only person who were able to, not, they were not, the fact that they supported a regime which torture and kill more than 25 million of persons is not being judged in France as something which you should be ashamed of. I mean, if you had supported the Nazi regime, you would be, even for a few years, you would be, I mean, some people, for instance, are attacking a French director, Claude Autant-Lara, who in the last year of his life joined the National Front. So it's forbidden to speak of him in many newspapers. But at the same time, in the same newspaper, there had people who were Maoists who are still writing, people who supported the Reichswehr and who are still admitted. I think there is something, I mean, 20 million, 25 million of Chinese are not worse. That you cry a lot about them. It's what Simonet said. He wrote when he wrote, he said, those people, the people who supported Madame Mao, were saying that it's very bad. They were ignoring what Madame Mao did, the murder she committed, the people, and they are ignoring the same 125 intellectuals of the world supported Madame Mao when she was judged, are ignoring the workers, the women workers, being prosecuted for asking a little more freedom, and they will be sentenced to 25 years of jail. There is nobody supporting them, nobody in America, I mean, in those intellectual or France or that, and that's so.
Time for another one or two questions, and then we'll have to break for 15. There's one here, gentlemen. Before, give you a little comfort break before we have in the electric mist.
Did you get any backlash for being sympathetic towards the police in El 67? And did that inform making La Patte or The Bait? I can't remember what it was called in English.
The Bait, it's called The Bait in English. Was there a kind of backlash in any sense to L627? And did that inform The Bait?
For me, it was the following. It was something, for me, very important to say. I mean, that people were lost in a sense of value. They did not know. They were living in a world dictated by images and by publicity, and ignoring the reality. All the things that some of the good cops, the cops who are interesting, which are depicted in L6, are fighting against. I must say that working with, I met, when you meet a cop who is an intelligent guy and I met several of them, many of them, they are the most interesting person I ever met in my life. They have a knowledge of human life, which is terrific. And then I made the film immediately after. It was about people who were totally irresponsible. I wanted to understand them, but not to excuse them. So I had to find that narrow line. And I was trying to make a film which would be responsible about irresponsible people. So I had to close the door. I never showed torture. I never showed the violence. I always closed the door. I always was showing, this is my opinion, the effect, the consequence of violence. And and I got a wonderful phone call from Alain Resnais, who said, you always close the door at the right moment. And that was exactly the point where, and people thought that I was attacked by somebody on the radio saying, you put a lot of blood, you see. I said, I didn't have enough money to get blood. So we were never showing that, except on the trouser. And I'm very proud of that film. I'm very proud of L627 and Debate. And I think the L627 has been judged recently by the COP as the most relevant film about the police by the cops who are film buff. And they all said everything which is in L627, it's now, it's all the issue we are dealing, except that it's 10 times worse. What you described was the golden age of the police. They told me, they are telling me, all the cops which I'm seeing have been, every time, I mean, people say, oh, you did that film, it's great. I mean, the court scenes, and a lot of people praise that movie. One of the most moving for me was a discussion I had with Steven Soderbergh, who said that I was calling him to complete, because I had loved Out of Sight.
Yes, it's a great film.
Which is a tremendous adaptation of one of the writers I love, which is Elmore Leonard. And he said, yeah, but Bertrand, you know, L627 is a masterpiece. And I showed it twice to my crew before making Traffic. That was the inspiration for Traffic. That was your film.
Fantastic. Well, that's an amazing compliment. We have to sort of have a little pause, but before we do, because Bertrand has ranged over a wide variety of subjects, and I think you've got a sense of this extraordinary career, and we've just shown a very few clips, and Bertrand's going to come back in a minute and introduce In the Electric Mist, but as a kind of way of recognising that, and also as a way of, you know, in terms of us bringing back in this modest way this year, but bringing back Shots in the Dark, and Bertrand kindly agreeing to be our guest of honour, we have a little kind of inaugural award. I don't know how he's going to get this back to France.
I don't know.
But this is for you. This is the very first Lifetime Achievement Award of Shots in the Dark ever, and it says so. And it's a little token. I can
die after that.
A little. No, you can't, because you've got to make the film in America. Yeah. But this is a little token of our esteem, our recognition, our thanks to you for being our wonderful guest, agreeing to come here, and for making so many wonderful movies.
My God.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bertrand Tavernier.
It's very heavy.
It is very heavy.
I don't know how I can bring it back. It will be considered as a weapon.
No, we'll find some way.
It will be a weapon. It can be one of those Australian things.
It's like a gigantic glass frisbee. If I can just hold it up so you should see there.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I have my name all over.
That's right. It'll go on the coffee table in your apartment.
We will be able to put the sea bass that you ate this morning over there.
So, we're going to take a pause now, and then Bertrand will be back. But please thank again our very special guest of honour, Bertrand Tavernier.
I need to carry a luggage.